Okay, so I realized I hadn't gone through my last post with you guys, and so I wanted to talk you through it. I was super excited to post it. It was the series I did on Instagram where when I was in Edinburgh, I walked around, or Edinburgh, sorry, I walked around and I looked at some of the different water features, because I always find that when I'm traveling, not only do I need some sort of theme to a trip, I need, there's a lot of water and a lot of infrastructure, and that's like kind of what makes life and has through all of history, and so it's easy to find water things for me, a little bit probably because I know what I'm looking for. So yeah, I walked around with my camera, like trying to look for faucets and fountains and things like that, and so it was really fun. I loved Edinburgh, and I would definitely go back, and if I went back I would probably get out of the city a little bit and go and see like Nessa, the Loch Ness Monster, and some of the other like fun things that are not in the city and are more like the Highlands area. So this, I'm gonna call this series a travel case study, because that's kind of what it is I'm traveling and I'm just studying like what people have already studied it, but I'm looking through it of the lens of like how I see it. So this one is Edinburgh water and sanitation, and we know that water and sanitation go hand in hand, because you can't have clean drinking water if you've got poopy sewer water like dripping into it and leaching off bacteria into your drinking water. So drinking water and sanitation. Well, oh, and also there's some really awesome pics, so you should go and check out the post. And there's more pics there than what I put on my Instagram, which was just highlights of like the 10 different things that I wanted to talk about. So it says, while I was in Edinburgh, I got really excited about the cool medieval water engineering. One of my favorite things to do while I'm solo traveling is to find all the water-related infrastructure. It's a nice theme to the trip. I came up with some other themes, and they were do to build architecture to look like rocks, castles on hills, poop down hills, rocks on rocks in cold places. I also went to Iceland during this trip. There's lots of rocks there too. And witch basaltings, which is a really poor pun. I'm sorry. So there's a picture of the Parliament in Edinburgh, which is the only like non-UNESCO looking or like a heritage site that is protected because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it's supposed to look like the basalt, like Arthur's chair in the background, which is like the really big hill, and it's just like a basalt hill, and it's this huge rock that you can climb up to, and it's really fun to do. So if you have time in Edinburgh, like somebody told me about it beforehand, and I was thinking, I probably won't go and climb this big rock, and then I rented a bike, and it was a ton of fun. I probably shouldn't have rented a bike because Edinburgh is so hilly, and I was so sore. And probably would have been more fun to just walk around and like taking pictures of the flowers and things. But so number one. In one of my Instagram posts, that's at DuMont Andy, if you haven't been there, I showed the Norloch, which is a marsh that was in the 15th century, was dammed up and turned into a lake. Currently, right now, it's Princess Street Park, and it's a really chill place to hang out next to Waverley Station, which is the train station. That's how I came into Edinburgh. As much as I love the geology of Edinburgh, which I posted a bunch of things about the geology because there's a really cool volcanic geology there, I wanted to deep dive into the confluence of drinking water and sanitation, and yes, that was a pun. Sorry. The top right pick in my image was a water use point. It's a little fountain that's one of 12 original that's found all over Edinburgh, which I talk a little bit more about later on in the post. So this is the first picture. On the top left is Norloch, with the Edinburgh Castle in the background. The top right is a water fountain viewed from a close, which is a street, which I'll talk about here in a second. The bottom left is me in front of the castle on a hill, because that's what Edinburgh is, like this castle on this hill, and then the old town and everything down around it. The bottom right is St. Giles Cathedral with a unicorn monument out front, and unicorns are the national animals of Scotland. And if you've seen, I posted another little video on my YouTube that was the guy who worked at the cathedral telling me all about the unicorns, and he was like, You guys know it's very hard to capture a unicorn, but if you do, you can't tame them. And it's so cute, which is why I posted that. It's a long video. But the part where he's talking about how hard it is to tame a unicorn is so sweet. I just realized my shirt is on inside out. Sorry, hot mess this morning. So next is a picture of this wellhead, one of 12. That's viewed from the close. So what's super awesome about the streets is there's 3 different types of streets, and some of the streets there's buildings, and there's like a little alley that goes underneath through the building out to a courtyard. And that is called a close. It's a narrow entry that leads to a courtyard. There's also wynds, W-Y-N-D, and the wynds are narrow lanes between houses, or they're like side streets. And then there's regular streets that are widened and more modern. So I have some pictures of these different types of streets if you want to go see them on my website. Number 2, Aldrich. Back in the day, this is way back in the day, like not US back in the day. Oh, I just heard Neil Gaiman in this podcast, or it was an interview at the end of Coraline, the book, the audiobook, and he was saying that in England, it's 100 years is not very long, but in the United States, 100 miles is not very far, and it's so true. So back in the day in Great Britain, there was, before Great Britain actually, I guess, there's no sewer system at all. Chamber pots were emptied into the street, and we all know that poop flows downhill right into the Norloch, which is at the bottom of the hill. Remember, Norloch is the lake. Number 3. Apparently historians debate whether the Norloch was actually used as a drinking water supply, but it's pretty obvious that, I think to a lot of non-historians even, that not only is poop flowing into their drinking water supply, if it is a drinking water supply, but also that it's not very big for this growing populace that is Edinburgh. Also, they may have done witch dunkings there. Actually, I think they're like pretty certain that there was witch dunkings there. There's a lot of disease in Edinburgh, a rich history of just like poverty and hardship, and it's in a very cold climate, and a huge difference between the classes, and there's lots of disease, and I think I talk about it a little bit later on in the post, so I'm going to save that little tidbit. So the city works on getting a bigger, better water supply. And as a side note, the castle that's on a hill is Hogwarts, basically Hogwarts, since J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter in Edinburgh, and y'all know that I love Harry Potter. So the next picture, my number 3, is the picture of what used to be the water tank. It's a 2 million gallon water tank, which is really big. It's a good engineering feat. I am blown away by it for this time and the engineering that was happening there. It looks a little bit small from the outside, but it's actually 5 floors inside. It's been turned into this like weaving museum and tartan store in the Royal Mile. So if you go in, there's just like tons of tourists like looking at all the different tartan. That's like that plaid, that pattern from Scotland that you associate with Scotland. There's also a bunch of like Hogwarts and house stuff, and there's like a big cutout of Slytherin, or of Severus Snape, that I went and I took some selfies with Severus, because of course I did. And right next to the building, or like on the side of the building, is a little fountain on the left, commemorating the spot where women were burned at the stake. The characteristics, they say that they knew you were a witch if you were a redhead, had birthmarks, or their nipples, which apparently were used to suckle the devil, which obviously they were. So, number 4. In 1676, after 50 years of debate over water tax and 4 years of construction, which, side note, I'm not quite sure that it's 4 years on top of the 50 years. Different sources kind of said different things. But enough that I trusted said 50 years of debate over the water tax law, and then the 4 years of construction on top of it. A network of 3-inch lead pipes channeled spring water from the Comiston Springs all the way down to Old Town. So springs like where water naturally comes out of the ground, because there's more pressure on a confining layer onto the aquifer, which that pressure just like pushes water up and out of these cracks or fissures in the ground, which we call springs. So supplemental water supply was routed there in the 18th century with wooden pipes. So think elm trees that have been hollowed out as the pipes. And they use these wooden pipes from additional springs to gather water and bring it into the city. So I walked all the way around this water tank and the tartan mall. I was like looking for something maybe to designate that it was a water tank. I don't know how they know it was a water tank. I couldn't find anything. I found a bunch of like 3.5-inch ductile iron pipes and some storm drains, but they all looked really recent. I took pictures of them anyway. So yeah, that's what you're seeing there in that picture. So in the middle, the little middle strip, the one side of it is looking down from the castle and the hill, kind of down into the streets below. The other little green area is the back side of that water tank, and it's basically a hill that it has like some retaining walls, makes these little terraces. More wellheads. The spring box itself looks pretty sweet from the photos. Built in 1676, it transferred 162,000 gallons per day to the tank on Castle Hill. I only learned about it after my trip, so the picture that I have is not one that I took. So if you go there and you find it, send me the pics, because I want to see, like, I can only find one picture of it online, and I want to see kind of what it looks like. So it's at the corner of Comiston View and Fox Spring Rise. I've also since learned about an awesome photo exhibition by a city engineer, which as I like to like Google and fact check my things as I'm writing these posts, and I found this photo exhibition, and you can see like the scaffolding. You can see how they'd like in order to divert the water and put in they put in these cofferdams, and they moved water around so they could do construction, and there's a lot of really cool engineering stuff, but they've got it all copyrighted, so I didn't want to repost it. But anyway, it's super cool, so go check it out. The whole image collection is by Alexander Leslie in Capitol Collections Library. All of the wells around town are like super unique, and they're all different, and I just love that about old architecture and old things in general. So creative. So number 5, water stands. From the springs to the spring box to the water tank, the water was then piped to these water stands for point of use by consumers, or what we'd call customers, but just like the people of Edinburgh. There's 12 of them. A lot of the tour guides are calling them wells. Some people call them water fountains. I've called them water stands. So there's 12 of them around the old town. 2 of them are in their original locations. That's the one at John Knox's house off the Royal Mile, and one of them is the Grass Market one, which is the one on Victoria Street, which is what Diagon's Alley is themed after by J.K. Rowling, and it's an awesome looking street. I think I also have a YouTube video about that. I mean, just like walking around, you can hardly hear what I'm saying because it's so loud, but yeah, it was so much fun saying that. So all the literature was calling them wells or wellheads, these water stands, but every time I heard it, I was just like, it's not a well. And I was like, okay, so there's a couple things that I could call it. Like, if you call them spigots, like, yeah, okay, it's got a spigot. A water stand, which I like have literally never heard that term except for like researching Edinburgh. But yeah, it's a stand that delivers water, I guess. A fountain, a point of use, which is, we have a client as a private client, and whenever we go, we sample their wells and see like where the wells are piped. We call all those locations like point of use locations, which I think is the terminology they use for legally, like if you're a community or a non-community system, or if you're a public water supply, like how many point of use points do you have, and those are like households, residences, blah blah blah. And also like each of the sinks within the residence, so each sink would be a point of use. Or cisterns, which I occasionally hear, but not as much in engineering. But a well is dug into the ground and it produces water, and it gives you like this old style vision of like dumping a bucket, like a wooden bucket on a rope, and like with a pulley system down into the well and pulling it up, and also like a well that I would work on, which is just like this huge caisson or casing that's in the ground, and you put a submergible pump or a line shaft pump in and pump it out, pump the water out. Number 6. By 1851, the wellheads were decommissioned. They're left around town, so I took selfies in front of like all of them, and people looked at me like I was weird. So I didn't want to finish this post on Instagram without saying something about the class differential and the uneven distribution of wealth within ancient Edinburgh. In the 17th century, the wealthy had water delivered to them by caddies, so basically poor people who had to actually work. And they used these little narrow buckets they called stow-ups, maybe, from the wells. And I think there was like this thing they carried across their shoulders, and the stow-ups are like hanging buckets on the edge of them. So it was a really posh life for the rich. The poor, you were walking on the street and had people like throwing the chamber pots out on you. In Edinburgh, or the Edinburgh Joint Water Company was then founded in 1819, and after a drought, the city prioritized the first man-made reservoir at Glencorse and Pentland Hills. For almost a century, they worked